And see the little numbers that'll start going?
It's recording.
It's recording. Good morning. We're here with Rod Neff. This is Edmonds Woodway High School and the City of Edmonds Museum Oral History Project. And today's date is September 1st, 2012. And we're really lucky to have a golden tiger, which is really cool. And the interviewers today for this interview to interview Rod Neff, who's an old Edmonds High School graduate, Jeff Bennett, History Club advisor, and Robin Mutali, member of the History Club at Edmonds Woodway High School. And Rod, thanks for coming in today. I have to ask right off the top, Edmonds High School Golden Tigers, is there a group of tigers that continue to meet?
Well, yes, the class of '49 meets, I think, weekly down here at the restaurant, with Claire's Pantry. I think it's Tuesday at 11 o'clock, and there's a reasonable group there. I guess they call them Edmonds Tigers. Yeah. So.
Well, it's really neat to have a lot of the people who will be watching these videos includes the school students.
Yeah.
Edmonds Woodway High School merged in the '80s, and a lot of the young people didn't realize kind of what are some of the things that happened.
Right.
So, Rod, as a young person, and you're in Edmonds High class of 53.
53.
As a young person, tell me a little bit about where you grew up. What was the area in grade school and that kind of thing?
Right. Well, I was born in Burbank, California in 1935, and then with my father and my family, we moved up here to Washington in 1943, and that was during the World War II.
Oh.
And so anyway, a lot of the people, the men where you were working, were frozen to your job. You couldn't just say, well, I'm going to move here and move there. But my dad didn't work for a company. He was a cabinet maker, private individual. And so anyway, we moved up here in '43, and as we come into Seattle, Boeing Aircraft Company was all camouflaged. You couldn't, from the air, it looked just like city streets. And of course, you could still drive on the streets underneath it, but they had this nettings and stuff like that depicting a city, a continuation of the city, masking and hiding the airfield and stuff like that. Anyway, we had settled up at Martha Lake, and all the roads were gravel. There was only a couple hard surface roads, and there was a hard surface road from Highway 99 into Alderwood. It was a concrete road, and all the rest of them were gravel. And the school district, by the way, had only 3 school buses, and they were old. A couple of them, I think, were 1934 Macs. Mac, M-A-C-K, is a truck, and they built bus bodies on it. Real old one. Had a bulldog out on the hood, representing that's their logo. But anyway, we moved out there onto a couple acres, and my dad was from Indiana. He had a farm boy, and he right away we bought a cow, a black Swiss cow, and then we got some pigs, and then we had chickens, and there was quite a few fruit trees on this property that we bought. And so anyway, the cow would give more milk than we could use, so that we bought a separator, a cream separator, and separated the cream and the milk, and we would feed the skim milk to the pigs.
Oh.
I can remember my brother Des and I, we'd have to, our chores in the morning, we'd have to get up and feed the pigs, and we did that by a kerosene lantern. So anyway, it was interesting. There was an old interurban line that, if you heard of the interurban trail.
Yeah.
Well, they had taken the rails out when we moved up. The rails went out in about 1939, but they left the ties, the wood ties, in there. And I remember we played a lot up on that old right-of-way. So it's now that interurban trail. So.
Yeah. So in that time period, was it? So it was fairly common where you lived in that Martha Lake area. Just very rural. Were there other families that did similar kinds of things? Chicken coops, a dairy cow, and
right?
That kind of
Lots
thing?
of chicken coops, and strange as it seems, a lot of the coops never ever had chickens in them. But see, Pope and Talbot, when they logged off the country up here, they scratched their head and said, well, now what are we going to do with these thousands of acres of land full of stumps? What are we going to do? And so they said, well, let's make little farmettes out of them.
Yeah.
And so they got their heads together and they put water in, and the water was because you had to have a well early on, and the water line was wood, and it was wrapped with a steel rod or wire, and then they put hot tar on it, and they coupled them together, and so all the water lines was there, but that was enticing to the people that was looking for small farms and stuff like that. So anyway, they built a model farm up in Alderwood, and it was to show these people, well, what you can do. Their idea was to raise chickens and get the eggs and sell the eggs. And with the interurban being in, that the husband or wife could jump on the interurban and go to town and to a job in Seattle. Then come home in the evening and tend to the chickens, and this was or produce.
That was their commuter system, kind of. Never thought of it. Right,
and that was a big selling point to these people who were buying these 2 and 5 acre tracts. And at the same time, Pope and Talbot encouraged, and they built a huge amount of the homes. They always built a chicken house on it, and all sizes of chicken houses. And they had usually a long chicken house would maybe have a feed room in the middle, and it might be 2 stories. Or that the feed room maybe would be on the end, depend upon the layout and stuff like that. But I remember we moved into one place that had a chicken house on it, but never had a chicken in it.
I never. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and in the heritage up at Alderwood there, they've got a lot of information showing a chicken and with a huge basket, and she laid 300 and some odd eggs in a year. They called her Babe Ruth. So anyway.
So Pope and Talbot, so they purposely, realizing that they had all this land, all the trees are taken out, and probably a lot of western redwood cedar, I think was the big popular tree. And because there had been skid roads down 196 into Edmonds and all over the place, but once the timber was gone, so did they then purposely, almost like real estate agents, then place these chicken coops in some of these big parcels then?
Yeah. And of course, the roads were the old logging roads. That's why there's a lot of roads up there that were so crooked, and again, they were gravel. And
would that kind of help explain maybe some of Briar and Montlake Terrace, because they were always
very crooked, and then they went the easiest way. If there was a big bank here, they'd kind of route around it or something like that,
Locust, Larchway, were those some of the logging roads?
Right,
then?
and they went, Pope and Talbot named them after trees and fruit trees and vegetation. They've Winesap and Gravenstein, those are all old road names that are up there. Now they've got street numbers, they've changed it to. But there's still a few up there, Larch and Locust and so on.
So those are the company names, huh? As a young, so you had chores, and you were doing them by kerosene lamp,
right?
And so you had tend to the animals, feed the hogs. Did you say you had chickens as well?
Yeah, chickens. Yes, and then another thing, there was a lot of trees on the front of the property, and my dad had us whitewash those things, and whitewash was a mixture of lime and water, and they give you what they call a 3-knot brush. It was a brush that you could hold in your hand, and anyway, it was we'd dip it in, and then we'd get it on the bark was real rough and irregular, and we had to work and get this whitewash in there. This was an old thing that they did, I guess, in the Midwest or something, being he was Indiana born.
And have nice fences that were always whitewashed.
Yeah.
Almost like a Mark Twain story,
right.
and was that like, so that was part of like being a young person, got to go whitewash the fence.
Right.
Were a lot of the lumber that was used around here, even in the 30s and 40s, was it rough cut stuff that maybe hadn't had?
Well, a lot of the houses built, were rough cut. They didn't plane it, and when you said a 2x4, a 2x4 in those days was a real 2 by 4 inches.
Oh.
And then later years they've planed them down, and they're not quite a 2 by 4 in dimension. So.
When you moved in and during the war years. Do you remember some of the adult jobs that are when I was trying to think about business in Alderwood and Edmonds, I understand the last of the timber operations in the waterfront, like 1951 or something, like kind of wrapped it up.
Right.
But what were some of the other forms of industry or commerce that, or adult jobs that were out there?
During the war, a lot of the people in the area worked at Payne Field. My dad got a job over there at Payne Field, and we could hear them play the taps at night over there at Payne Field. Now, see, all the vegetation hadn't really grown up like it has now, and of course that blocks off sound, your vegetation. And the trees, there was trees, and they were huge trees, but when the wind was right, we could hear them play the taps from Payne Field.
Did it have a fair amount of like military
Oh, it was a large
going
field.
on? And because I've heard stories about Mukilteo and the ferry landing, and I think they call it Japanese Gulch or something or other,
right.
and supply ships and all kinds of things were going on. So your dad worked up there. What kind of?
He was a carpenter, and of course they were really busy. I had a lot of people up there. They were P-38s. That's a Lockheed air-built airplane, and my dad worked for Lockheed down in Burbank, California. But anyway, they had a squadron of P-38s out there. I can remember them flying over, and so. But there was a lot of employment there, and and at Boeing. Boeing had a plant. A small plant up in Everett, on the corner of Rucker and Pacific. It's now some sort of other building, but it was, they commandeered a lot of buildings because they were building that B-17 in Seattle, and and thousands and thousands of them. So
wow. As a young person, now how many kids in your family?
There's 5. There was oldest was a boy, and then the next was a sister, and then Des, myself, and then I have a younger brother. The 2 oldest siblings have passed on.
So your mom must have been pretty busy.
Yes.
I mean, watching out for all you guys.
Right. Well, my mom made soap, lye soap, from fat, and this is way back when she was a girl, young girl and stuff. And times were tough for them people back there in those days, but I can remember making cottage cheese out of the skim milk, putting it in a sack and letting the whey drain off of it. So, of course, we made butter. We had the cow and got the cream and made butter and made homemade ice cream. We had an old hand crank.
Rock salt or something.
Rock salt and ice and So,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
With what did young guys do your age in grade school? So you had your chores, you probably went to school, and I mean it was a rural environment for kids. For young kids, let's say in grade school age, what were some of the things that you guys would do? Well,
we would play out in the woods, and one thing we would do, we would climb up the tree. First of all, get this tree so it almost ready to fall over. And then everybody climbed except one person, and they continued to chop and cut on this tree, and then they rode the tree down, and this was the thrill. You didn't want to be on the side that was going to hit the ground first, so they, the tree's going that way, so they all got in there. So that was one of the things we did. And then there was a lot of vine maple. Vine maple grows in a clump, and they don't grow too large, but you could kind of shimmy up it, and then if you cast your body out, it would swing over, and you could drop off, and the branch would come back up. It was like monkeys, I guess, playing around. But we did that, and we swam down in Martha Lake. It had a little resort on it, and had a float and a dock and diving board, things like that. So kind of kept us busy.
For school, on school days, so there must have been, he said there were 3 buses, so they must have had a pretty big loop on those gravel roads to getting everybody. Was that pretty easy, or that took a while?
Well, yeah, it took a little while, and the bus, I remember one thing about it, it had one big door on the front, and it swung open, and it was very large, and everything was steel in those days. Aluminum hadn't taken on. And so anyway, the driver would have a handle, and he could pull it, and the door would swing closed, and then it would, what we call, cam over and stay lashed. But the roads were so rough and steep. There's some steep hills on it, and twisty and windy. Well, the body of the bus had to twist and flex, and this steel rod that went to the door from his handle would break, and they would braze it. They wouldn't weld it. And I can remember this brass material. There must have been 10 or 15 places where it would break. It didn't seem to part where they brazed it together, but that was. And I wondered, well, why does it keep breaking? Well, I understand now. The twisting of the body, puts tremendous stress on something like that. So anyway, that was.
And the roads were all gravel, and it was just that's the way it was
dusty,
a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Martha Lake Road, for example, that's got that bottom to it, a swamp creek down there. But when you started down, you could see maybe someone driving down on the other side, and if they didn't slow down, you didn't slow down either, and give them a dust cloud. If they slowed down, then we would slow down. So when we passed, there wasn't a huge dust cloud. But it was, of course, gravel was flying too. When you pass in a car going about 40 or 50 miles an hour on gravel, and only about that far apart. So, anyway.
Sure was. Now, so you must have gone then. I think you said Alderwood Grade School.
Right.
Now, presently, that's a vacant area across the street from the Linwood Convention Center.
Correct.
And so 196 itself was quite a bit different than today.
Right.
What do you recall about old 196?
Well, that was the only section that had a hard surface on it, I'd say concrete. And it was a concrete road, and it took a jog in it, dodging that Scriber Lake.
Oh, yeah.
And Scriber Lake sets up in there. And when they, years after, well, I don't know, these must have been in the 60s, they tried to straighten that road out a little bit. And so it's very boggy, and we've got pictures up at the Heritage of them building that, and they put logs down and put dirt on it, and thinking that would give them a good bed. Well, the wood just kept going, and they just kept hauling and hauling, and they had the picture you almost have to laugh at. It looks like toothpicks, all stacked up in here, and they putting this gravel and dirt on it. And it's pushing it down, and pretty soon these logs started to squirt out, and ends of these logs were sticking up. And I don't know, for years you could drive by there and see these logs sticking up from squirting out, but they evidently got it solid enough, and that roadbed now it's a little bit wavy. But if you look carefully, to the north of that, there you'll see the old roadbed in there. It's part of the park now, that Wilcox Park.
Yeah. Oh my. So as a young guy, you moved up during the war years. Young people sometimes hear stories about some of the precautions that the police and municipality took to. Do you remember experiencing blackouts and stuff like that, or practices, or civil defense folks?
Especially I remember that in California, because we were right close to the Lockheed aircraft plant, and that was a pretty vulnerable spot down there.
Oh, yeah.
And they had what they call air raid wardens. A citizen of your block would, he had a cap or a hat, and they'd sound the siren, air raid an alert or a test. They didn't tell you it's a test. It says lights out, and they would. I think they pulled the power in the big, what do you call it, substation.
Yeah.
And I can remember my dad. He built shades so they could blackout shades so he could put on the windows or something. But anyway, I remember him saying he was a smoker, and he took his cigarette lighter and lit it and went flip like that, and the light come on, and bam, there was an air raid warden there right now. Put that light out. Like he must have been standing next to him. He was there right now. And so they were really strict on that. So in case, for the Japanese, they shelled the coast of California. They had some fuel tanks along the coast down there, and it's no military secret. The Japanese had a sub, they surfaced and took some shots at those tanks, but nothing ever ignited.
Yeah.
So.
So you're at Alderwood Grade School. I mean, today, most schools, if you go to a school, grade school, there's maybe even in a fifth grade class, there might be 32 kids in there. How small was that school at that time when you were a kid?
Well, there was about 30-some kids in the class, and they had two classes, usually second grade, two of the third, fourth, fifth, and on up. And they would call them A and B, 7th A, 7B.
Oh.
And it didn't, they didn't try to push the more intelligent one direction or the other, you know, so.
Oh. Did it go through grade 8?
Yes.
And then you would go to the high school?
Then we went to high school, right.
And the only high school of all the Edmonds School District boundaries, the only high school was downtown Edmonds, the building built in 1910, the brick thing. Right. Had it been expanded when you, by the time you got there?
They expanded that about 1940 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was the only building, or only high school in the South County there. But
so you went to high school, and as a high school kid, so it was grades 9, 10, 11, 12, downtown Edmonds. Downtown Edmonds must have been quite a bit different. So you started like in 1949. 49.
Right.
What were some of the things that were so different about 1949 downtown Edmonds?
Well, they still had a big, I remember a big barn or deal down on 3rd Avenue, a livery stable or something like that. I remember that, but there were still steam engines running up and down the railroad. Really? Yeah. Oh. And then of course the ferry boats. You could hear the ferry boat, and they had a foghorn down on the ferry dock, and it was a siren. And of course it gets foggy in Edmonds sometimes all day long. You know, you hear this siren, you know, every 5 minutes, because the ferry would dock on that sound, the sound of that siren. And
no radar. That's true.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And and they had it was Pointer Willamette was a company that was down in Edmonds still running it, and they were still building submarine nets down there. And I know a lot of the high school kids.
You mean here in Edmonds?
In Edmonds, right down on the
building
waterfront.
Submarine nets? Where would they do that?
Well, they were building them. Of course, they'd ship them all over the country. But the submarine nets, they had them in the waterway leading into Bremerton Shipyard.
Oh.
And they had them on log booms or something. And when a ship went through, they'd open it up, and a big ship could go through, and they'd pull it back. And they were made out of a real strong cable. And this was quite a job. The hoops, I'll have to talk to some of these guys that.
But Edmonds people were making them.
Oh yeah, then a lot of young kids working down there, young high school guys, because these wires, they had to weave them around and make a loop, and then the next loop would be interwoven, and they would, that's for these ports and stuff. That's what they used as for anti-submarine. And
kind of where along the waterfront would that have occurred? Because I remember Andy's boathouse south of the ferry dock.
Yeah, this was probably close to between Arnie's and Anthony's, somewhere along there.
Lafarge and Eggy, or something like that.
Yeah, so it was loaded with shingle mills. You know, there was just when all the wood was being cut and everything. So
people we've talked to talk about the mills had different whistles or something to that effect.
They could have. I wasn't aware of that. Of course, up at Alderwood, I got down here a little bit, but I really didn't come to Edmonds until I got into the high school. And of course, we turned out for sports. And
what kind of sports did you do?
Well, I ran in track, and I tried to turn out for football, but I was too small. I didn't. I just didn't find a position for me, but I turned out for track. And
what were your events?
Well, I ran the low hurdles, short legs, but I made it over it. The low hurdles and the 100-yard dash, and sometimes the 220. I ran the 220 in the relay, the 880 relay, and I lettered for 3 years. I got a letter as a freshman, which isn't always all that happened, but I was on the relay team, And we placed in the district. And if you placed in the district, you could get a letter.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
And then sophomore year, I guess I didn't letter, but I got a letter in the junior and senior year. So.
And the track team would have practiced here at the Civic Field,
Right.
roughly the same cinder track.
Right.
And you guys would use the field house, which is the Boys and Girls Club.
Right, that was a shower room.
And I believe those stands were the stands that were there for everything,
For a
football
long
and the
time,
big events.
yeah. Some early ones, I don't know if they burned down, but they had a fire or something in them.
Yeah.
I can remember that in that field house, over Christmas vacation or something, we had gym baskets, and you put your stuff in there. Well, I had a bar of Lifebuoy soap and had it in there, and the mice got in it. There was mouse droppings all over the place. And of course, then there's the days that they would throw guys would throw a kid out the door without any towel or something, and shut the door, and it was quite the.
So were there shower facilities in there
Oh,
too?
yeah.
So that you could do your practice, whether it was
Yeah.
football or track,
Right.
and then shower up. You guys shower up before you
We
get out of
showered,
here.
yeah. Every practice we showered. They had towels and things like that nowadays, or in those days.
Oh, sure. Was
And-
Coach Rowe?
Coach Rowe, Rich Rowe, and Stu Smith.
Uh-huh.
Stu Smith was the track coach,
Yeah.
and it was interesting. Good. The field wasn't fully developed. The football field was, and it was
Yeah.
the only one in the area that was dirt. It was dirt,
It's
sand.
still, I just can't believe that.
Oh man, oh boy! And all the other schools had turf fields, but anyway, the track field went derelict or something, and they were working on it, trying to get it up so we could really do a real good run around on it and stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember one night that I did get to play for a little bit near the end of the game and playing Mount Vernon or something like that. I think there was a guy named Joe Day. He was a coach in Mount Vernon. He is an Indian fellow. Anyway, they played dirty. When you went down, they'd jump on you and they'd like this.
With the sand?
Yeah, sand.
Oh.
And most of the guys knew when you went down, you closed your eyes. Well, I didn't. I went down and didn't close my eyes. I stagger off the field, trying to get sand out of your eyes, But, yeah, the teams were Marysville, Mount Vernon, Anacortes, Burlington, Arlington, Marysville, Snohomish, and Edmonds that was in the league. In 1949, they had a very good team. They were undefeated for a long period of time.
Did players have to wear like a jacket and a tie on game days, and they put trains sometimes maybe to go to games, or did they just go buses?
Oh, the team had a bus,
Yeah.
and then of course the student body would pile in one or two buses, and they'd bus the student body to the opposing game, and so it was interesting in that way. And then they had a boxing team.
You did?
Yeah, and I turned out for that, but I never got into a match. Stu Smith was a prize fighter. He took some championship on the West Coast or something. I questioned my brother Des or something on that. He would tell you, but Stu Smith was one of the first Americans into Japan after they dropped the atomic bomb.
Oh,
He was a frogman, and they pushed him out to the sub come up, and they went offshore with rubber things, and they said they wanted to know what was going on,
Yeah.
And he was among, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 12 other frogmen, and they all had passed away way before Stu Smith had passed. But he's got some.
So there could have been a fair number of your teachers who, after the war, when you were a young guy, had been veterans of the war and things like that?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah, there was a teacher named Von Warnicke. He was an English teacher, and I remember him telling me he was a parachuter in Europe, and he says, I remember parachuting out, and you hear these bullets snapping. The Germans were shooting at him, and hear him snapping as he went down. So anyway, yeah. And of course, Bill Phillips was in there, and so there's interesting thing is Harold Spike Silvernell was my ag teacher.
Uh-huh.
And of course, he ended up being the superintendent of the district.
Oh, yeah.
And he was, we had, I think I mentioned earlier once to you, that we had a FFA chapter at the high school. That's Future Farmers of America. And if you're a member of that, you need to have a project.
Yeah.
And you've got an animal or some sort or anything like that. But anyway, we had a tractor, and the tractor had a plow and a disc and things like that. And we'd go out and do custom plowing and disking. And
the school had a tractor?
yeah, this FFA chapter owned it, and
then go to places to practice.
Yeah, and we had a truck, flatbed truck with a tank sprayer on it, and we'd go out and spray trees, and that's when they had DDT around, and
oh, jeez,
they're spraying with it.
Oh my!
And on this tractor, there was a great big buzzsaw blade that we could put on it, about this big around, attached to the back of the tractor.
You high school guys.
High school kids, yeah.
Oh my God.
And we were small, you know, and we could go to a person's yard. They'd say, yeah, I've got some wood to cut up.
Yeah.
And they had fallen as alders or something like that, big logs this big around,
Yeah.
and 6 or 8 feet long, and big enough that we could lift it up to this blade, and this blade had a saw attachment, had a rocking table. You could put this log on it, and then you pushed it forward, and the saw blade would cut it off. It was just fixed there.
Yeah.
And can you imagine?
Oh my gosh!
Nowadays, you know,
We don't even they can't even have scissors anymore.
no, let
Saw
alone even a
blades.
skill saw around. You
Would
know.
that cut the log in half, or did you like lengthwise?
No, not
like,
lengthwise. You just cut it, and then you'd move the log down, and it took 2 of us to do it, you know, and
Yeah.
push it in there and back, and there we go. Yeah. And then, of course, we took trips every spring. The FFA boys would jump in a truck, and it usually took 2 trucks, and the bookies feeding something up on the highway there, loan us a truck, and we'd take off, and we'd maybe go to Portland, and from Portland we'd go up the Columbia River. Bonneville Dam is when they were building all these dams, and they had models there at Bonneville of what these dams were going to look like, and so on and so forth. And so anyway, that was kind of interesting. Make a big loop. It took us 3 or 4 days. It was on spring vacation. We'd sleep in bags. And
Camp out?
and that was it. We went to Canada,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
up there we got locked in the restaurant. This owner up there, he thought we were going to run on him. So
Yeah.
as soon as we all got in there, he locked the door, unbeknownst to me, or us, you know, ordered our dinner and everything, and started paying. We go to the door, it's locked. I'll be right there. As soon as everybody paid up, we got to go out. Something that was funny. So
when I think about you guys, so you had FFA and your trips that you did. I never knew about the sawmill thing. And there were sports. Were there?
they had plays, you know,
Yeah.
big plays, and Mr. Phillips was a stage manager, or whatever you call it, stage crew director.
Because the current auditorium was there, because I think it was like 1939 or something. And
yeah, they had a regular stage crew deal. That was a class. They could earn credits for it.
Yeah.
And I can remember my buddy that was in FFA with, we had the welding ability over there, and they wanted a perfume bottle made, and that they'd have a singer come out of it. And it was big. It's a 6 foot big platform and 6 foot high. And so this guy's name was Willis Williams, and they came over and wanted to know if we could make it. And yeah, we can make it. So we got pipe for standards, you know, and put a top on it with a stopper, and it had a light in it, and then put this semi-opaque pink plastic around it, and it looked like it was a half-filled perfume bottle, you know, and we put doors on it, and the stage opened up, and the people, oh, you know, saw this beautiful piece of, like, Hollywood prop, you know. So anyway, and the doors opened, and a girl named Julie Einerson, she came out and sang a song, and the pictures in our class annual of her doing that. And so we had projects. You could make chisels and and trailers. We built trailers. My buddy Willis, he built a horse trailer.
Oh my.
Tandem axle horse trailer. I built just a little cargo trailer, and it is still around.
What do you mean, like around town?
Well,
Or-
yeah, I think it's in California, Arizona now, but I bought a special axle for it and
Yeah.
everything. So.
All right, so there was, we're down to 5 minutes. So metal shop, wood shop, theater, sports.
Got to tell you another thing.
Yeah.
We even had a cider press as an FFA. We'd go out and gather apples in the neighborhood. We pressed up apple juice and cider, and and we sell it at the football games.
No way. Oh,
Yeah,
my God,
can
that's
you imagine
wonderful.
that happening nowadays?
Safety and health standards, they'd pass out.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh, it
goodness.
did a lot of things.
Oh
It's
man. You know, I've got 5 minutes left. I was, you know, the high school experience is something that's so different now. So you had dances, I think, were held at the gym.
Yeah.
I think there was a building, an opera house that sometimes would serve for that, but maybe there was the gym because the gym was built.
Most of the school dances were held there, but then after football games or maybe things like that, there was down at the, I don't know, it's a Mason Hall or something. It's down here on, I think it's Dayton.
Near
right?
Middletown? Yes,
Yeah.
on Dayton Street.
Yeah,
So
right near
there
the.
would be activities there?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you guys, were there soda shops that, I mean, like Benz's? Was
Yeah,
that open
Benz's.
then?
That's my sister-in-law, Dez's wife's mother owned that.
Ah.
Benz's confectionery.
And that was a real soda shop, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
with the spigots
yeah.
and all that stuff.
Marble Bar and.
And you must have gone to the Princess Theater
Princess
once in a
Theater,
while?
yeah.
What was a ticket?
Oh, I don't know. It was cheap. I remember the theme song of it. Sunset. I think it's Sunrise Serenade.
They had a theme song?
Oh yeah, that in the theater it played before the movie came on.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah,
I
and
never
then
knew-
during intermission.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, my word. We've got just a couple of minutes left. As far as you've stayed in this area your whole life.
Yep.
What are the reasons why? Because I'm like you.
Well-
What was it about staying in this area? that
Well,
was so,
I just like it. The weather's great. You know, you get a little bit of everything. You know, snow, rain, sun,
Mhm.
and of course we're pushing 40 days of sun right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
then, and of course, my family was here, and I went in the military, and I ended up over here in Olalla, and met my wife, and married her, and so.
Yeah. And you get together with some of your tiger buddies once in a while? Is that
Yeah.
so? There's a little group that gets together and has breakfast from time to time,
Right.
or that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yes.
And so I just keep staring at that golden tiger, you know. As an Edmonds Tiger of 1970, I'm so glad that folks get together. It's just really neat, and I want to thank you so much, Rod. Last question. You're Rod. I always ask everyone I interview,
Yeah.
so how did you get the name Rod? Tell me about Rod.
Well, my real name is Rodney, but my
Oh.
nickname was Skip, and I went through school and Skip. And Mr. Hatch up at the school says, "What's your real name?" I says, "It's Skip." He says, "Nobody's real name is Skip." And so anyway.
I never knew. It's
yeah.
actually Skip, but you
It's-
go by Rod.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
my.
Right. So,
Well, I want to thank you so much. This is really wonderful. We'll make a DVD copy for you.
Okay.
And thank you so much, and thanks for being a great Edmonds Tiger.
well, thanks.